Now that we understand the concept of a virtual network and a network security group, let's see them in action on the VM we set up a few moments ago. You can see here we're in the portal. We've opened up Skyline's VM 001. We can see that the VM is running, and additionally we can see the public IP address over here. I've also connected to that server using SSH, and I've got a simple website running on it. If I go up and run the curl command of localhost, I'm saying I'm going to open up that website locally here, and we can see that 1, it is up and running, and 2, it is a very simple website, but this proves that we can connect to that server, and since there's not a port specified here when we're calling localhost, it's going to assume the default of port 80. Now, to see if that works outside of the virtual machine, I'm going to copy the public IP address here. I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to go ahead and hit go here. And it doesn't look like it's going to work. So that tells us there's something blocking port 80 traffic from the internet to that virtual machine. If we go back to that virtual machine and take a look at the networking of it, we can see here that it does have a network security group, or NSG, that's associated directly with the network interface, and doesn't appear that there's one associated with the subnet. So with that said, let's go ahead and open up that network security group, and I'm going to slide this off to the left so we can view it a little better. And we can see we've got inbound security rules as well as outbound security rules. Looking at the inbound security rules, we can see we've got the default of the bottom 3 below. We also have the one up top that allows TCP traffic on port 22, also known as SSH, which we validated is working because we are connected to that server. It also tells us that it's not going to allow TCP port 80 traffic through because it's not listed. In order to fix that, let's go up here. Let's go to inbound security rules. Let's do an add. And then we can see we have an option to specify the source, which in this case would be any. We don't per se care about the source port range, or we don't care what destination it's connecting from, but we do care about the destination port. By default, it's set to 8080. Let's just change that to 80. We're going to specify the protocol of TCP. We're going to give it an action of allow, and we're going to leave the default priority. Please note that the lower the priority number, the more important that rule is, and will take precedence over others that are configured with the same settings. We'll also give it a name here of HTTP, and we're going to go ahead and hit add. You can see here that it's creating the rule. It will take a little while for that rule to set up. Usually it becomes effective within a few minutes, but it can take longer. You can see here it's successfully created. We're going to give it a minute, and then we'll go open up that web page again. We'll do a refresh, and there we can see we do have that traffic allowed. NSG is allowing traffic on port 80. Again, that's not specific to how the NSG is configured. That's how our website was set up. To summarize, we validated that the website was running on the server and was accessible, but we weren't able to access it outside of that server. So we took a look at the network security group, saw that there wasn't a rule to allow port 80 traffic. We created one, able to validate that it was working. We've talked about Azure Network Security Groups and how they give us the ability to restrict access to a virtual machine or to a given resource in Azure from a certain location, as well as connecting to specific ports. You can take that a step further by leveraging Azure Just-in-Time Access, or JIT access. Azure Just-in-Time Access gives us the ability to have time-limited access to a virtual machine. The reason for this is if we have management ports open because we need to connect to that virtual machine to manage the resource, rarely are we going to have to connect to that resource on a constant basis to be managing it for various tasks. Typically, a lot of times once these are set up, you get them up and running, you configure them, and then you don't touch them unless we need to perform maintenance for a given reason or address some sort of issue. With that in mind, there's a lot of times where those resources are left open and vulnerable because those management ports can be accessed and can be used to compromise that virtual machine. By enabling time-limited access, it greatly reduces our risk that that machine is going to become compromised. we can leverage Azure Security Center to configure just-in-time access. We can either do a broad-reaching scope to where we can apply it to multiple machines at a given time, or we can configure it on a single VM. It allows us to restrict access to given ports. So, for example, some of the common ports would be SSH or port 22, or for Windows machines, we've got 3389 for remote desktop protocol, as well as 5985 and 5986 for Windows RM. Additionally, it gives us an audit history of who and where they were connected from. And we leverage RBAC for who can request access. So we're not only making sure only the correct people can access it, we're also auditing every time they do. To understand JIT as a whole, the first thing we need to do is we need to configure access. Much in the same way that we would configure a network security group, we need to determine the ports and the locations that are allowed to connect to that resource. Additionally, we need to configure how long that resource can be accessed, so the maximum amount of time that JIT can be enabled for. Once we have access configured, we need to now place requests in order to connect to that machine. Again, this leverages RBAC to not only control who can make the request, but also who can approve or deny that request. And additionally, we're also able to go back now and audit who has requested access, who has been granted access, and who has actually connected. JIT is a very helpful utility to give us the ability to help not only control access to our virtual machines and make sure they're not unnecessarily exposed, but also give us that audit capability to make sure we can understand who is connected to a machine and why were they connected, and hopefully help identify any issues that may have been caused by whatever activity was performed on that virtual machine.